All right. Well, Warm the Hockey Podcast back with you. We are in the 100s for our episodes. I believe this is 102. So we had a few weeks off in between, so it might seem like it's more, but it's episode 102, Warm the Hockey Podcast. This week we're going to talk a little bit about surprises so far and what we see for the second half of the season, trade deadline, different things like that. Few points to discuss with all that. We're going to kick things off, first of all, like we always do, mentioning the audio platforms and the social media platforms where you can find us, Facebook and Instagram, Warm the Hockey Podcast, at Warm the Hockey Podcast, respectively. Engage with us, write questions, concerns, stories, anything. We'd love to hear from you. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio. You can find us there. Subscribe, rate, and review. Follow along and share with family and friends. Warm the Hockey Podcast, episode 102, I believe. I hope I'm not misquoting myself, but
I think you're right.
Episode 102. Kick things off real quick. I know it's a few weeks since it happened now, and so we're a little behind the ball on it, but we feel we need to at least touch on it, even if it's not breaking news. The 16-year-old kid in Connecticut who tragically passed away during a hockey game. I have his name, Teddy Balkind. He's 16, high school kid in Connecticut. He was a sophomore, defenseman in New Canaan. He collided with a player from Brunswick School in Greenwich, sustained a severe neck injury, transported to Greenwich Hospital, but did not survive surgery. I believe, and it doesn't look like the article here says specifically, but I believe the collision led to the opponent's skate clipping his neck and clipping an artery in the neck. I believe that's what happened. Don't quote me on it. I don't want to misspeak, especially when it comes to something tragic and heartbreaking like this. No matter how many listeners we have, I don't want to misspeak or misquote on anything of this nature. But I believe what I heard and my understanding was that the collision led to an opponent's skate clipping an artery in his neck. And you almost, I should not chuckle when talking about this stuff. I chuckle almost out of awkwardness and being a little uncomfortable. You almost had an incident like that with the Hurricanes. Did you see the hype around their storm surge last week or something like that? Racing around. It was like they were treating it like the storm surge NASCAR race, I think is what they called it. And they dove to cross the blue line. But if you look at the picture, the guy in front's skate is right up against the guy's neck. And that happened not far removed from the news of Teddy Balkind's accident and incident. And
if you're old enough to remember Clint Malarchuk's accident in Buffalo, same thing. His life was saved by the miracle of a doctor being right at ringside. Richard Zednik got clipped a few years ago. I believe he was playing for the Capitals at the time. It's a real thing. I'm shocked it doesn't happen more often. The majority of them seem to happen as a guy goes wide and cuts to the net. He invariably ends up getting upended, skates up head high, but it can happen anywhere, anytime. And from my own personal experience, I played most of my life without a helmet. And when I did wear a helmet, finally, after in the early 2000s, when I did wear a helmet, it was the old Jofa bike helmet. It was, the guys called it a diaper. And it was, it did practically nothing. And I never once wore a mouth guard, but I wore a neck guard the whole time. And I don't know why. I could never explain to you why. I never had a close call, but I wore a neck guard every single time I went on the ice. Never wore a helmet until somebody made me. But I'm a believer. I've believed in them all along, and I would, if I went back on the ice now, I would wear a neck guard. So
my son will wear one. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
I never wore one. I had one.
No.
I had one early on. You got me one early on to start, but it was one of those bib ones. So it had the thing that went underneath.
Yeah.
And
both of them.
and when I moved, that kept popping up. Right. So
Yeah,
when I'd play, the bib would keep popping up. So it was frustrating, especially in a game. So I just took it off. Later on, they developed just the ones that go here.
Right.
No bib or anything like that. Had I started with one of those, maybe I would have stuck with it. But
the ones that are a part of your undershirt are my favorite ones, but those are not easy to find, actually.
But it goes to show you different things to use for safety. Like in baseball, they had those heart protectors. You used to wear over.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because I mean, things pop up in anywhere. Like he's a stand-up comedian now, but his name's Drew Lynch, and he was playing. I believe it was just men's league softball, and he mishandled a ground ball, and it popped him in the throat.
Oh yeah.
Damaged his vocal cords, and then. But when he took it, he also fell and he hit his head. So what happened was he jokes about it. If you listen to any of his clips or any of his stand-ups or anything, he jokes about, doctors always say don't fall asleep with a concussion. And he did. And, but what ended up happening was, and this was something I never thought would happen or you could see, but he fell asleep with a concussion. And when he woke up, it actually gave him a permanent stutter. Because of the damage to the vocal cords. So the concussion, falling asleep with the concussion, led to a permanent stutter. Now he talks with a stutter. So it's one of those things though where you got to be. It's the problem is we get, and you see it from a skill perspective. You see it from the different things. You get too many kids nowadays who want to be cool more than they want to be effective or safe. And I want to be cool, so I'm not going to wear a neck guard because it's just so awkward. It looks like I'm wearing a weird shirt or a weird, anything like that. Or I'm not scoring goals, or I'm not doing anything unless I'm going bar down. Forget that I'm buzzing pucks by my own teammates' heads, or right. I'm missing the net 95% of the time. It's bar down, and things like that. So there's a misconception with today's generation that to be an effective hockey player, you have to be cool. You have to have that swagger. And
what's cool? Results. Yeah. The coolest thing in the world is results, and that's wins. Not necessarily your goals or your plus minus or anything else, but wins are really cool. I don't know if we talked about this on a few months ago or not. It seems like we did. I don't remember if we were on air or not. Back in the early 2000s when, Brent Sutter was coaching his team in Red Deer. And they were not doing well. I think it was before Christmas, around midseason, not having a good year. He went in before practice one day and took everyone's sticks and replaced them all with wood. Took every composite stick out of the building, replaced them all with wood, and he told the guys, "This is the only stick you get. I'm not giving you another stick. If you break this one, I don't know what to tell you. This is your stick." In practice, they started getting shots through to the net. The big wind-up, scraping the rafters with your wind-up, went away. They started hitting the net. They ran off like 14 out of 15 wins and went on that spring to win the Memorial Cup.
Yep.
And they were playing with wood sticks. I don't know what it cost them in miles per hour on their shot. I don't know what it did was it made them quit ringing them off the glass above the net. It stopped them from missing one-timers by 3 feet, and it started producing wins, and they started playing smarter. So to your point exactly, the coolest thing in the world is winning, and nobody's going to ask whether you looked good doing it when you're carrying a cup around. So,
and it starts with development, and today's coaches don't help it. I witnessed it. Coaching.
Social media doesn't help.
Social media doesn't help, but I witnessed it. When I coached, I was on the ice. I witnessed it firsthand from these coaches being put in charge of skills camps.
Yeah.
And you know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to name names. You know specifically the person I'm talking about. These people that are put in charge of skills camps, and they're teaching kids to shoot. But what they're doing is they themselves are putting it bar down. They're putting it bar down. I watched eyes on in person. The coaches themselves ring 3 out of 5 shots off the glass while trying to teach these kids the proper way to shoot. 3 out of 5, and then the other 2 went bar down. Like there was no fundamentals about it, about, hey, pucks on net for rebounds. Hey, put it in skates, put it in feet, make it hard to see, anything like that. It was just, 3 out of 5 off the glass, 2 bar down, and that's how you do it. And so we talk all the time, developmental and fundamentals. It starts there. And unfortunately, in certain areas, I witnessed it firsthand. Again, won't name the coach or the association. You and I both know who we're talking about, but you get coaches that aren't properly doing it. And then you wonder why you get kids that, Bryce Peterson, you remember him? You get kids that will never, ever pass the puck. And you get kids even in squirts that are basically using a pitching wedge and getting it off over the glass. Like there's nothing.
I'll tell you what you do. If you think we're wrong, if this offends anybody, first off, tough. You don't know what you're talking about. Secondly, go and listen to or try to get some background on guys like Brett Hull and Gretzky and Ovechkin and the best goal scorers in history. And they will tell you, get it off quick, get it on net, and nobody knows the difference when it goes in, whether it was going 70 or 80 or 90. Phil Kessel has like a 70 whip on his stick. Yep. He can't hardly shoot it out of his shadow. And here's a guy that scores 30 goals a year every year. But when you're dealing with trick shot guys on social media and coaches who don't know what they're doing, and maybe, God love them, parents that don't know any better than to counteract what the kids are being taught at the rink, this is what you end up with. So it's not just that, it's defensive fundamentals. It's guys that can skate and shoot and bench press and do all the fancy stuff in the world. And when you get them in a hockey game, they have no common sense. They have no instinct. They have no idea what they're doing. And then coaches in junior are taking this fantastically skilled kid and trying to unlearn everything that he's been taught for the last 10 years and reprogram him to play defensively, to win faceoffs, how to check properly, how to take a hit and give a hit, how to pass the puck, like how to get to open ice, moving without the puck, all the things that you and I talk about as second nature. A lot of these kids at 17 years old have no idea what that's all about. And it's a shame, but
it's okay. Like I was baffled at John Tortorella's comments about the Zegras play. His comments about it bothered me because it's like John needs to understand that we're not in the 70s and 80s anymore. So to make a comment of, if he did that back in the day, well, John, right, wrong, or indifferent, we're not back in the day. The point I'm making with it though is that a Zegras type play I'm okay with, so long as the kid has a foundation of fundamentals beforehand.
And he appears to.
So don't throw him on the ice. And I'm not talking Zegers specifically. I'm just talking in general.
In general.
Don't throw the kid on the ice and the first thing you teach him, or the first thing he tries, is a Zegers play over the back of the net. It needs to be fundamental. The first shot that you teach this kid at a skills camp better not be bar down. Teach him fundamentals and developmental hockey. And as he or she gets older, now you can start to develop, and you can start to send them to different skills coaches that might have trick plays or might do this and that, because they have a foundation of not only a skating ability, but also the right way to move the puck, to shoot, to pass, anything like that, fundamentals. And if you don't do that and you just start them out right away with bar down, Zegers passes, the lacrosse style Michigan goal, all these things, then that's all they're going to do, and that's all they're going to try. And then you get 95% of the shots off the glass, and you get kids at 17 or 18 who struggle to make a double A team because they're not effective unless they're standing by themselves.
So if you want to fiddle around in practice and improve your skills, like I just saw in the Islander Maple Leaf game, Mitch Marner on the back check. He was back checking hard, trying to take the player driving the center lane. It was a 2-on-1. Marner's right behind the guy going in down the center lane. Marner was just about shoulder to shoulder with him, and a saucer pass came across from the winger into the middle, and Marner tapped it out of the air in midair in full stride, charging back to his own net. You're not going to do that unless you practice some eye-hand coordination to knock down passes, to accept passes that are coming at your knees. If you practice that stuff, that's great. And I'll use Sebastian Aho. Remember, he did the lacrosse goal a couple of years ago. Well, there was some criticism over that, just like the Zegers play. That kid has become a very solid hockey player, a very effective player. He may never do that again. I don't care whether he does or not. He's an effective guy, and Moore's got him playing at a very, very high level every single night. He does it all over the ice. So that particular play may be 3.5 seconds out of a 20-year career. If that's the case, great. But if you're trying to do that constantly, you're not going to get far. So if you ever get an opportunity to take a pass out of midair, or to do, to bat the puck in the net out of midair, or something to that effect, great. Good on you for having the eye-hand coordination and for fiddling with it in practice and fiddling with it with your skills coach all summer. But as a part of the game, it should never be a focal point of your night. So, put it where it belongs. I don't see any problem with it. There's changes that go on in the game. I like Torts. I've become a bigger fan of him over the last 10 years. And I think what he was trying to say was, it was unique, but is it really good for all of the thousands of 10-year-olds watching that? Every single one of them the next day in practice was trying it. Fine, but stick with the fundamentals. If you get a chance to ever do that, go. But
stick with the fundamentals.
You're not likely to.
Stick with the fundamentals. I do think, to go the other way just slightly, I do think a play like that is good in that regard, because it'll help a lot of kids want to start playing hockey.
Well, yeah. And look at the body of work of leaders.
You can do those type of things. Wow, look at how cool that was. And it starts the next generation of being interested in the game of hockey, which you need in order for the game to continue. So long as when they start playing, you don't lose it. You don't focus solely on that. You start with fundamentals and development. So anyway,
back to the
Balkind family. Thoughts and prayers with his family and everything. Kind of carrying on, natural conversation. So I like it, but carrying on a little bit. Back to the Balkind family with that. Back to net guards and things. So thoughts and prayers there.
Yes, definitely. And, at the same time, we just this past week lost Clark Gillies.
Clark Gillies, yep.
Who was a fantastic human being and a great hockey player, just completely. For a guy in the Hall of Fame to say that he was underrated, he was underrated. He's in the Hall, and he deserves to be there, and he'll always be remembered for what kind of a guy he was on and off the ice. Quintessential power forward, over 300 goals, 4 Stanley Cups, took on Terry O'Reilly, took on the toughest guys in the league, and scored 20 goals every year. So God love him. And you know what? On a related note, because they're from the same hometown, I don't want my old friend Doug Wickenheiser to be forgotten.
Yep.
He was a great guy. He was, and I'll just give you a couple minutes background on him. He was the first pick of the Montreal Canadiens, and I believe it was 1980. He was a big, strong kid from Saskatchewan, played in the Dub. It just was monstrous numbers in the Dub. He was about 6'1", probably 200 pounds. Montreal was trying to get a little bigger and a little tougher, and so they drafted him and passed on Denny Savard. It didn't work out. Wicks was never well received. The community in Montreal wanted Denny Savard. They did not want anybody else, not Doug Wickenheiser or anyone else. So he never really caught on there. He was traded to St. Louis, and in a rookie party thing a couple of years later, he was taking part in being out one night with rookies, stepped off the back of a pickup and busted his ACL, and he was never the same. And then in his 30s, died of cancer, and and he was such a beauty of a guy. I got to know him really well. I rented a room from a couple of women in St. Louis because I was hardly ever there. So I rented a room in their apartment, and he was dating one of them. And this guy, we would stay out until all hours of the morning. And at 6 a.m., he's in my room going, "Hey, get up. I got a tea time. Let's go." I mean, the guy never ran out of energy. Nicest kid you could ever want to be around. And just a tragic story from start to finish. For a guy who played in the NHL, don't forget him. Look him up if you're not familiar. Doug Wickenheiser was a great kid, and I don't want guys like him to be forgotten just because they're not in the Hall of Fame or because it was 20 years ago or so. So anyway, God love you, Wicks.
Thoughts and prayers to the Balkind family and
Yes,
Gilly's family.
Yeah.
And,
Don't forget. Never forget.
Yeah. Anyway, War Room the Hockey Podcast, episode 102, started in kind of a somber, serious note. Transitioning though, we're about halfway, give or take a few games through the season. We're kind of established ourselves now on who will likely be in the playoffs, especially in the East. The East is kind of set. The 8 teams there are kind of set, with exception of just final seeding.
Right.
Kind of separating, kind of figuring things out.
There's no question.
A few surprises based on our preseason, early season predictions. Number of things like that. Things to discuss in regards to the trade deadline coming up. Who makes a big splash, all that stuff. I will say this. I'm not one for I told you so's, but I will say that I was so far correct on my comments about the Edmonton Oilers.
Yes, you were.
And it's fantastic that Tippett's great and Holland is awesome and all this stuff, but you know what did I say about them when everybody was hyping them, not only before the season but early season when they started 9-2 or whatever their record was. Yeah. Everybody was hyping them, and like I always joked with you guys about the Colorado Rockies, or anything like that. I'm sitting there going, well, just be patient.
Yeah.
And here we are. And why? Because at the end of the day, when all you have, and I don't mean all you have, Tyson Barrie's a good player. Bouchard is tremendous. Nurse is terrific. Things like that. But when all you have production-wise is one or two guys, eventually that catches up to you. It's the
You get
same. It's the same argument to say. It's the same argument to say, "Wow, look at the Colorado Avalanche. They're the number one scoring team in the NHL, but their goaltending is shaky."
Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, they can win the President's Trophy. They can do whatever the hell they want, but come playoff time, that goaltending is what's going to do them in, or vice versa. Wow, all-star, future Hall of Fame goaltender, but they can't put the puck in the net. Well,
Right.
even an all-star, future Hall of Fame goaltender will eventually let pucks through at some point. You got to have depth. You got to have a team worth of production and ability, and all Edmonton has proven that they have right now is Draisaitl and McDavid, and it's showing. All of a sudden, teams catch on. All of a sudden, teams start producing and moving, and now Edmonton's 2-13 in the past 15 games,
and yet they're still only 3 points out of a playoff spot. So if seriously, they are not going there unless they get it righted and quick. They got no cap room. They got their depth has dried up. What their depth was doing in the first month of the season, it is no longer doing. They need help on defense. They need a lot of scoring depth, and they've not been sturdy in goal. They've been hit with COVID shutdowns. They've been hit with injuries, but
every team has.
Everybody has. Don't even buy that. So you got to get this thing righted. The West, believe it or not, with the exception of maybe Edmonton, San Jose, and Calgary swapping spots at some point, the 8 teams in the West are set just like the East. I mean, you could be pretty assured of at least 14, if not 15, of the 16 playoff teams today.
Yeah.
So,
well, speaking of playoffs,
that's not good in a way. There's going to be a lot of teams with nothing to play for. Might be a lot of musical chairs with respect to the trade deadline. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. There's good and bad with it being kind of established already. Again, I can't with teams like Chicago. I can't say I'm surprised based on the comments I made, because their refusal to pick a lane.
Right.
They didn't go all in, but they also didn't choose a rebuild. And so they didn't pick a lane. So what are you going to do here? So they're not last place, but they're not going to make the playoffs. So, and then you come out and you make a comment that Taves and Kane are the only untouchables. So that makes Dak and DeBrincat and Kubalik and all these guys tradable. Yeah. These guys are your future.
Right.
These guys are what you need to build around for a rebuild. But Taves and Kane are the ones you're keeping. Look, I'm all for career franchise guys with teams. I like that. I honestly think there's not enough of it.
I do too.
With all this stuff, I'm leaving. I'm going home to Toronto. Okay, well that's great. If I were in the NHL, I'd love to come home and play for the Avalanche.
Right.
Love it. At the same time, there's also a respect factor for the team that had faith in you, that drafted you, that gave you this moment, and there's not enough of it anymore.
And paid you $100 million, by the way.
There's not enough of it anymore. That's why I'm hoping guys like Stamkos finishes in Tampa. I'm hoping Doughty finishes in LA. I'm hoping Landeskog and McKinnon and even Rantanen, even Makar. I'm hoping all 3 or 4 of those guys spend their entire careers in Colorado. I'm hoping that Matthews can finish in Toronto. Well, maybe not. I'm hoping, Gaudreau in Calgary, or Besser in Vancouver, things like that. In my opinion, there needs to be more of that loyalty of hometown teams. These guys drafted me. My career is here.
Loyalty, yes, Evan. But think
if I have no choice, if I get released or traded, it is what it is. But if I have a choice, I'm staying.
And you do have a choice, because all these guys that you're talking about have limited or full no moves. But think too, if you're rebuilding in Chicago, one of the things that you've got to build around is leadership. And nobody is going to give a young player high draft picks and prospects, nobody is going to provide better leadership and credibility than two of your guys with 3 Stanley Cups each and a history of knowing how the game works and how to act like a pro, and that's Kane and Taves. So do I want to spend $20 million of my cap per year for leadership? Wow, that's a tough one. But you've got to have somebody around that can
100%.
make sure kids understand.
I'm not saying that Taves and Kane need to just
No,
go.
no, I know.
But it's, again, in the long list of Chicago problems that have been going on this season, another optics problem being that you're coming out and saying that they are the only untouchables, and you're not even going to consider or listen to offers. You're not even going to do what you need to build a future. DeBrincat, Kubalik, Dak, these are guys that you build a future around.
That's a nucleus for you.
And that's a nucleus. And if that means Taves and Kane on their next contract are willing to take a discount in order to be that leadership, fine. And if not, then you have some decisions to make. But those 3 guys are your nucleus. And the fact that you've now made them expendable says a lot to what's going on, to me, to what's going on in Chicago right now. And
or are you trying to light a fire under them?
Maybe, I don't know. But it was baffling.
You mentioned Edmonton and Chicago. Of the teams that we would not have thought 4 months ago were going to be wallowing around looking for a lottery pick, what are your big surprises so far?
Well,
you can't say Edmonton's a surprise because you said all along they're not going.
They're not a surprise to me. And on the Edmonton thing, I want to pose something to you while I talk about some surprises, and then I want to hear your thoughts after you've thought about it for a minute.
Okay.
Because again, Tortorella came out, remember, and made comments about the type of player McDavid is.
Yeah.
Is there something to that, though, in regards to playoff hockey? Does either Edmonton need more Tom Wilson's, Josh Anderson's around him, or does McDavid himself need to toughen up a little bit? Because McDavid's high-skilled hockey doesn't take the Edmonton Oilers very far in the playoffs. And yes, that part of it is all you have is McDavid in that regard. But also part of it is clearly a 100-point guy every year, and he's carrying the team, and yet they either don't make the playoffs or they flunk out. Does his style of game, at least in the playoffs, need to be different? That's a question, rhetorical or not. That's a question.
Yeah, he needs better support. Certainly, he cannot. And Crosby didn't do it. Wayne Gretzky didn't do it. Ovechkin didn't do it. Yager didn't do it. Lemieux didn't do it. None of the great players did it by themselves ever. Were they instrumental? Were they focal? Absolutely. But you've got to have support. And we talk about depth all the time until there are 4 lines and 3 pairs in Edmonton that can play in every shift. No, he does not. Nobody has the style of play that can carry a team. One thing that I will tell you, because I saw it when they were rookies and when they were 22, 23 years old, Connor McDavid needs to be very careful not to say much. He needs to be really careful with what he says and how much he says. Gretzky had a reputation as a 21, 22-year-old as a yapper. Crosby had a reputation as a yapper. Until you mature enough to outgrow that and just learn to shut up and take it, you'll earn the respect of the referees, you'll earn the respect of the media and the fans if you just play your game and don't be waving your arms and giving the big shrug your shoulders every time you get touched. Play your game, work a little harder, and show your teammates and everybody who's watching you, which is everyone, that you're the toughest guy on the ice no matter what happens. And that's a matter of not necessarily how he plays, but how he reacts. But no, I would say Connor McDavid's as difficult to handle as any single player maybe that I've ever seen. but absolutely no one can carry a team without all that depth, and we know that.
Well, I'm going to gloss over this week the topic of officiating because my blood pressure will go sky high with how officiating has been this season so far. But moving forward from that to surprises. Edmonton, not a surprise. Arizona, where they are, not a surprise. Montreal, I wouldn't say it's a full-on surprise. I'm surprised they're last. I'm not surprised they're out of a playoff spot. And that's not to undermine any credibility of last season. Last season is last season, and you still have to get on the ice and play, whether it's just simply in your division or it's everybody. You still get on the ice and play. You still compete. You still earn it. I'm not going to pull a PK Subban or Drew Doughty here and say that it's not credible or real. It was what it was that they made the Stanley Cup final.
Right. Yep. How about Philadelphia?
That being said, though, I'm not surprised they're out of a playoff spot. I am surprised they're so far in last place. That with Montreal, in regards to Montreal, that's a surprise to me, is that they are so far in last place.
To go from the Cup final to very likely the first overall pick in a few months is fantastic. I mean, that's a spectacular spiral. And Carey Price being gone, Shea Weber being gone, all the changes that have taken place, having Joel Edmondson out of the lineup, having problems with Jonathan Drouin, like there's a myriad issues there, but boy, is that a free fall.
Yeah. I mean, you saw it. Free falls. You saw it, and it's not comparable because they didn't make the Cup final. To me, it shows that Montreal was hitting a little bit above their weight class last year.
Yeah, that's fair.
You get a team like the 13-14 Avalanche, who ran away with the division, and oh my gosh, rookie year for McKinnon, and oh, here we go, bounced in the first round, and then after that, they're not only out of a playoff spot, but then they get a 48-point year, and you get examples of like that where maybe they're not, and you look at them now, and they weren't and aren't a bad team. At that time, they were hitting above their weight class. Right. And I think Montreal last year was hitting a little bit above their weight class and have come back to earth a little bit here.
Most teams are that way. I mean, like a lot of teams are very guilty of being false positive, making that cup run. Happens all the time. A lot of teams then are likewise false negative. They're not as bad as they look, but you start adding up injuries, maybe a couple of cold goaltenders and some other problems, guys that didn't show up and guys out of the lineup for whatever reason. And then, when a team starts to go cold, and I'll use the example of the Philadelphia Flyers, that's a good-looking team on paper. We both like them as much as anybody at the beginning of the season. But when it starts to go bad, holy mackerel, does it go bad?
Yeah. Wow.
And at the end of the year, I will have missed the Flyers' ending position by 30 points.
Yep. Oh, 100%. I think it's at this point that they're just not going to make the playoffs. I think that's just the way it is. So let's admit to ourselves and to our listeners right now, we were dead wrong about the Philadelphia Flyers.
I think other than that, though, like
in the East, we were pretty dead on with some of our picks. Now, obviously, seeding will come into place, but in terms of being there in the playoffs, I think we were pretty dead on. Big surprise in the West for me, and I'll say this with egg on my face. Nashville Predators.
Oh, Nashville and Minnesota both.
They're playing lights out hockey in Nashville, and more specifically, and this is the part I say with egg on my face because you know where I stand with him. Matt Duchene is having himself a pretty good year.
Yep.
He's on the score sheet. He's effective. He's having himself a pretty good year. And how I feel about him, whether that's steeped in credible thoughts or it's a personal thing with how he handled things when he was in Colorado, or both. Either way, one, it doesn't change how I feel about him, but he's having himself a year, and you got to give credit to him. And UC Saros is tremendous in net, and
he's been great
filling in for a pack of pickled peppers and all that.
So yeah, look, it's a results world, dude. It is absolutely a results world. It doesn't matter what you did yesterday. It doesn't matter what you might think you're going to do tomorrow. It's a results world. Matt Duchene is putting up results. The team is putting up results. Guys who have underachieved fantastically in the past, like Ryan Johansson, putting up results. That's all that matters. And they've got a third line that is as good as anybody's in the league. So, okay, we're good with that. And same with Minnesota. I thought Minnesota would struggle to get out of the lottery. And here they are playing really well. Big plus on the year. Solid playoff spot. Could go on a run and challenge for, maybe second or third in that division. And then conversely, while we're talking about negative surprises, I had no idea that Dallas and Winnipeg could be as bad as they are. That shocks me. The rest of it, Seattle, Edmonton, San Jose, no big deal. How about our goaltending consultants team, the Anaheim Ducks? Who had them picked for a solid playoff team?
I didn't. Now here's the question. They've come back to earth a little bit. Do they make the playoffs? That's the question. In terms of where they are now, they've been a bit of a surprise. They've competed. They've been there. They're tough to play against. They're there. And our favorite goaltender, and we all do it. You do it with the Leafs. I do it with the Avs, and Owen does it with the Ducks. We all are a little pessimistic in our views of things. So Owen will hear this or have something to say about it, saying, "Oh well, watch them shit the bed." But they're playing tremendously, and Gibson's strong in net and everything. I think they have a chance of being a solid wild card team, if not even second or third in the division. Partly because the Pacific Division is not the strongest of divisions this year, and so they can stand out a little bit.
But
they are surprising.
I've seen them play everybody tough. I've seen them play the top teams and play them really, really tough. So they're making strides. They're going to probably, as we know, they need to figure out how to keep John Gibson from leaving town. They've got a really good young core. This Jamie Drysdale on defense is a fantastic skater, great with the puck. As we know, Zegras and Comtois and Steele and Max Jones, these are good young core guys. So I like them. And the same with the Los Angeles Kings. Yeah. This is
LA Kings. They played. I watched them play the other night, and they gave top team in the Western Conference in Colorado a run for their money. So they're playing strong hockey. And LA, I didn't think would be there with Doughty and Kopitar and Brown on the other side of 33 and all this stuff. They're and Jonathan Quick and everything. But you know what? They've done, to me, LA's done what Chicago should have done, and they've invested and committed to their future while also doing what they needed to keep some solid leadership guys around.
Right. That's exactly right. And it's a pretty good looking rebuild.
Look at Kempe. Look at
great pipeline.
Kempe and Anderson and Peterson and Net and Kaliev and these guys. But surrounding them is Doughty and Brown and Kopitar, and to insulate them. And now you've got some quality Stanley Cup championship leadership to help elevate these kids during a rebuild process. And it's something that Chicago is not doing. And so you look at the comparison there, LA is doing what Chicago should be doing, and with their youth and with their pipeline and with their depth. And it's showing. And Rob Blake has done a tremendous job in LA. and it's showing. And I'm confident with how they're playing. LA will be there at the end of the year. Whether they're cup contenders or not is another conversation, but they will be there at the end of the year, and they'll give Anaheim or whoever they get in the first round a good contest. And
They'll ride Quickie for a while,
yeah.
and they can be pretty sturdy. Now Byfield's healthy.
And it gets you playoff experience for some of your younger guys, so that when Doughty's career is up, or when these Doughty or Kopitar cap out, now you trust Kaliev and you trust Anderson and you trust these guys because they've got that experience, that competitive experience, and it's the right way to do it pipeline wise. LA, Colorado, these different teams have done it tremendously well in terms of drafting, development, and their pipeline for building to the future and doing all that stuff. Tremendous job. Nothing but positives to say about the LA Kings. They've done very, very well.
If you don't draft, you don't win. You've got to come out of the draft every year with a minimum of 1, if not 2, full-time NHLers.
Yep.
If you can't do that with 7 picks, you are destined for limbo. And the worst place you can be is in the middle of the pack. You're not making the playoffs, your fan base gets upset, and you're not getting a top pick. So you've got to learn how to draft. As we've said many, many times, nobody has to learn how to draft Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews or McKinnon. Nobody has to you don't even have to do anything. Any 9-year-old with a TV set can draft those guys. It's finding Nick Lidstrom in the 3rd round. That's where the magic is. That's where the cups are. That's where the domination is. When you can come out of a draft with 3 or 4 guys that play every night, you're going to start to turn everything around in a big hurry.
Well, it's a diamond in the rough. It's a diamond in the rough, and that's why it confuses me when they come out and make absolute statements in Chicago, like DeBrincat, a guy who is a 2nd or 3rd round draft pick that nobody thought would be there. He's expendable. Kubalik, Dak, these guys are expendable.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see whether they really are or not. They may be expendable, but the price tag might be so incredibly high that maybe they like the rebuild better, having Kubalik or Dak move for a 1st-round pick and a prospect or something. Who knows? But I got one thing I need to point out before we move away, and it may or may not come true. But I'm a fan. When the season started, I was a fan of the Kings and a fan of the Ottawa Senators as far as the rebuilds are concerned.
Yep.
Ottawa is near the bottom of their division, and they're not looking good. But they have, if you count them up right now, as of this recording, Ottawa has 9 games in hand on Tampa. They've played 9 fewer games than Tampa. They've played 6 fewer games than Montreal, 8 fewer than Detroit. If this team can just play a couple of games above 500, they're going to challenge. They won't get to Boston for a playoff spot, certainly, but they're going to challenge a little bit, and they're difficult to play against. They're a very plucky team. And I like watching them. And going back to your statement earlier about loyalty, finishing your career someplace, I would hope that Brady Tkachuk starts and finishes in Ottawa. Yeah. He's a good kid and a good player. And as soon as their health and their goaltending and their depth solidifies around him, those of us who are fans of teams that they have to play in their division every night, we have to start hating them again pretty soon.
Yep. Let's finish here real quick with a minute or 2 of trade deadline speculation.
Okay.
Put yourself in position here of a team that is there for a Stanley Cup, but needs that unwavering goaltender. Okay. We'll use my boys in Colorado as an example.
Okay.
Kemper and Francouz have been tremendous the past couple weeks.
Yep.
Is it something and there's different aspects of this to the question, but I'll go with the one specific. Is this something that you do? You go out and get a Fleury. You go out and, type of goaltender. He likely won't re-sign.
No. And you can't re-sign him for that
And
money.
To get him, you had to hemorrhage a bit of your pipeline. Is that a risk worth taking to go all in on a Stanley Cup? Or do you trust the process and trust that you can get it done with what you have to also ensure that you can continue to compete in the years to come? Now, one trade is not going to completely ruin your future, but it will bleed you a little bit, like the rumor, like the talk between Colorado and Philadelphia. Fletcher and Sakic spoke. Sakic likes Giroux.
Yeah.
Fletcher, though, proposed a trade of a first-round pick, I believe, Justin Barron,
Yeah,
and Alex Newhook, which Sakic immediately rejected because he doesn't want to move Newhook.
no,
I appreciate.
I like Newhook,
But that's an example of the type of trade you're looking at to get a piece like that. And so, is that something you take the risk on when it comes to a goaltender, which you need, or do you trust the tandem that you have, so long as they can stay healthy, and trust the process?
You can only make that decision if you see them in practice every day. When these two guys are healthy, and again, I know there's been a lot of criticism, and rightfully so, because their goaltending's been the Achilles heel of this team. Francouz has trouble staying out of the shop. He spends too much time on the trainer's table. Kemper has not played up to where he was when he was playing in no pressure whatsoever in Phoenix. Mentally that a goaltender playing with house money in Phoenix, where nobody knows the difference, nobody cares, you have nothing but upside. If you win a couple of games, if you make 48 saves, you're a hero, even if you lose. In Colorado, you can't give up goals. You can't give up a win, lose on 24 shots, because this is a cup contender. So that kind of pressure is different. Now, if he adjusts to that, and you only know this being around them every day, if Kemper adjusts to that pressure and becomes Kemper of Phoenix, then they're fine. And if Francouz can play every fourth night and stay healthy, that goaltending tandem would be fine. If those two things don't happen, then you've got to go get Fleury, who will not cost a lot, because he's got too much of a cap hit to trade. He's at the end of a contract, so he's not going to may or may not re-sign anywhere. So he's not going to cost you much. He might cost you Marty Kaut or a second rounder or something like that. So if you had to pick up Fleury as an insurance policy, especially if you get an injury, that's not a bad move.
If you can do it cheap, I'm okay with it. If you can do it cheap, I'm okay with it. Because then you can trio it: Francouz, Kemper, and a Fleury.
Exactly.
To use Colorado as an example, there's several other teams that are in a similar position, but to use them as an example, you can trio it, and Fleury can be that leadership, and he can be the B goaltender in a tandem with Kemper, while Francouz is the guy there to backstop if you need the minutes. I'm okay with that. If you have to give up prospect first round pick and this player for something like that, I'm as nervous as the goaltending has made me a little bit this year. I'm choosing to trust the process.
Yeah. I'm not one of the guys. I'm not someone who would be willing to panic at this point. Now, you get toward the middle part of February, maybe the end of February, and you start looking around, and Kemper lets in a few stinkers and Francouz gets hurt, I'm pulling the trigger on something because this team is too good and too close to winning to let it go on the back of suspect goaltending. I haven't seen that yet. And that's the difference between being in the room every day and seeing these guys at practice every single day and being on the road with them and not. So, you sit on the outside and speculate, but that would be the automatic move is Fleury.
And to close this out, and then we'll finish.
Okay.
That's the thing in Colorado. To continue with Colorado, I've seen one or two games where I've looked at it and gone, okay, 2 or 3 of those goals Kemper needs to have.
Right.
The majority of the time, I'm sitting there watching a game, shaking my head because the rest of the team is giving the puck away or is chasing circles around their own end or any number of things like that. Which again, to our comment earlier about the Edmonton Oilers or about anything like that, any all-star Hall of Fame goaltender will eventually let the puck in the net if the team in front of him is doing shit like that.
Right.
So at that point, can you really put the blame on Francouz and Kemper? There's been a few moments where you look, okay, that's a leaker. Okay, what's Kemper doing? Things like that. But in the past 2.5 weeks, I haven't seen anything like that. Anything that's gone in against LA or Montreal last night or anything like that, I can point to any number of giveaways or turnovers or any number of bad penalties or any number of this or that in front of him that leads to a hardworking team like Montreal or LA putting the puck in the net. If you lose your assignment and you don't clear the front of the net, Anze Kopitar is going to put the puck in the net like he did the other night. It's going to happen. So that really can't be on Kemper. So it's as much on the team in front of him as it is on him. Now, if all he's letting in are beach balls, now you got a problem. But
I don't see that. I see I see Jack Johnson throwing a lot of pizzas in his own end, and I got one, and I love this kid. I love the pickup. I love the long-term signing at the price that they got him, and he's a great skater. But Sam Girard gets pushed around. You've got to be in the playoffs, especially. They are going to have to be really, really careful with his matchups. If you get him against a big, heavy line, he gets knocked around, and he's got to move the puck quicker because the beatings turn into turnovers. So
you got to do something, and unfortunately, he might be a trade piece, just because Taves and Makar skate just as well, and I like Girard, but
I do too.
all Girard has is his little tornado spin and things like that. And when you've got Taves and Makar, you kind of already have the puck moving skating ability, and you're deep enough on defense that you can have bigger, tougher guys. Byram, if he gets healthy, any number of that.
That's probably more pivotal in my book. Byram getting healthy is more pivotal than your goaltending. If he's healthy and strong and playing 23, 24 minutes a night, now you keep Jack Johnson and Sam Girard out of harm's way. You can hide them on the third pair if necessary. Byram's got to be healthy for the playoffs. The other guy that I think, whether he's in the press box or whether he's on the ice, whether he plays whether he never gets off the stationary bike or if he plays 7 or 8 minutes, your dark horse MVP on that team is McDermott.
I was just going to say, he is
a deterrent. He's a good deterrent to people taking liberties with your stars. He's got to be around.
Well, they've done a good job. Bednar's made a smart decision with him, and they moved him off the back end. His skating ability is not such that he can keep up if he's playing defense. What they've done is they put him on the fourth line, and now you're not really concerned about his skating ability because he's a fourth line big body and things like that. And that's a smart decision by Bednar there to not have him on the back end.
I'll give you an example, Evan.
Keep him on the fourth line, and then and there you go. And McDermott is a guy who who can throw.
Yep.
Seen it. He's a
Can
guy who can hit. He can go to the corners. He can be that guy, and he's the first one there. If the stupid officials drop the freaking ball on Greenway running into Kemper or anything like that, so it's which again, I'm not going down that rabbit hole. How McDermott got an instigating penalty and Greenway only got 2 minutes is beyond me. Nonetheless, McDermott is tremendous, and I didn't think I'd say that when we brought him in during the off season.
You got to have him. I'll tell you two very quick things before we sign off. The only thing I would have probably waited on fighting Greenway if I'm McDermott until the game is under control. Secondly, maybe you put him out there against Kaprizov's line. Let him, even if he takes a 2-minute boarding penalty, let him go out there and wallpaper Kaprizov after that Greenway hit on Kemper. That's a message received as well.
Yeah. Well,
so that's one thing. And the other night, the other one, same exact parallel. The other night, I saw the Leafs get run out of Madison Square Garden. Ryan Reeves, just by being in the building, scared the crap out of the Maple Leafs. They had nobody finishing a check. I don't think they made solid body contact with anyone all night long. Nothing. I mean, they were not willing to finish a check anywhere on the ice against anyone because they knew that Revo was coming. So that's one thing that and he's done that. He did it in Pittsburgh. He did it in Vegas. He's doing it in New York. And they got him because they cannot play the Washington Capitals without Revo. So those
it's a 50-50 thing with what you said. It's a 50-50 thing of you run the risk if you don't respond to Greenway hitting your goaltender in the moment.
Right.
Run the risk of the optics being that you're not engaged in the game. There's no passion. That's your goaltender. That's your teammate.
Right.
That's your backstop. What are you doing if Greenway does that and then you just let him skate to the box without getting in his face? Right. And you being a Leafs fan have witnessed moments like that in years past of Tavares or these guys getting wallpapered and everybody else just kind of skating by.
Nobody can answer.
So how do you have to answer it? So you run the optics. You run a bad optics potentially if McDermott or anybody else just skates right by Greenway and okay, well Kemper lays on the ice. At the same time, is there a better time to send a message? Yes, but you also can't just let it go. You can't let it be.
No.
You are two good teams. You're two teams jockeying for position in the West and the Central. All this stuff. Potentially a first or second round matchup between the two.
That's what I was going to say.
So you can't just let it be.
No.
So it's that 50-50 of it of, unfortunately, do you want to take an instigating penalty? No, because you want a power play. It's key. But you also can't let your goaltender lay on the ice after taking a headshot and just stand there. So,
rhetorical question for you. How is it that player safety, and we've got to sign off because we could go on all afternoon. How is it that player safety can mandate that a guy has a head injury and goes to concussion protocol, but he didn't get hit in the head? Which is it?
Yeah.
Did he get hit in the head or not? You can't have both.
Didn't get hit in the head, but it also flies.
He has to go to the quiet room.
Flies in the face hypocritically of the standard that they operate by of headshot, guy injured on the ice, injured into protocol, which plays into suspensions.
Right.
And then nothing. 2-minute penalty and no discipline. But yet he's injured, you take him off the ice, headshot, all three standards met for a suspension and nothing. and yet you wonder why I have a problem with the officiating, why I have a problem with George Peros, why I have a problem with all this stuff. It's a problem, and it's been a problem for me all season, starting with Landeskog getting suspended for hitting Kirby Dack.
Yep.
Penalty, yes. A penalty, absolutely. Interference, boarding, whatever you want to call it, yes. Dack was on his knees, yes. Suspension, when you look at everything else that's not being suspendable, you got a problem. And it's been a problem even further if you look back to Tom Wilson against Artemi Panarin and everything like that a year or so ago. You got a problem, and we're to a point where I don't care how much you want to defend officiating or how much you want to defend the league, we can no longer deny that there's a major flaw in how things are operating right now. Plain and simple. We'll end there because we can carry on forever. World of Hockey Podcast. This was episode 102. Facebook, Instagram, Worm the Hockey Podcast, at Worm the Hockey Podcast, respectively. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. Subscribe, rate, and review. YouTube as well. Hit the notification bell. Share with anybody and everybody. We appreciate your support. Thanks for joining me on Zoom this week.
Love to be here. Thanks for having me. Look forward to next week. We got good material next week.
Absolutely. I'm Evan Rower with Worm the Hockey Podcast, and we'll see you all throughout the hockey community. Cheers.
Cheers.